I've made the joke that it's like everybody is auditioning for a role on The Fast and the Furious. Okay, I've made that statement. Now, that's not to say that because of the movie The Fast and the Furious, that's why people drive like maniacs on Highway 70.
Right.
That movie had nothing to do with it. That movie, people may say, hey, I saw that movie and I want to do this, but that's them seeing something and making a choice to do a thing. You can't blame a movie. You can't blame music. You can't blame anything.
No.
It's your fault. You did.
Well, they're blaming video games for mass shootings or something.
All four of my boys were what I thought were video game addicts as they were growing up. You know what? They've never shot anybody. They're all good members of society with families. It didn't affect them at all.
Right. I mean, the real reasons for these things get buried because it's more convenient to blame, let's blame the guns or let's blame Dave Chappelle making a joke or, it's all about control and power. And and if you look back, going back all the way to the 900s in England, that's a real thing. Studying what was going on in England when they were during the Middle Ages is a real interesting way to see what's going on now. Because back then it was like you had all these warlords and you had the king say, hey, I'm the king. Well, why should we recognize you as the king? Well, because the church says I'm the king.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, well, the church really didn't have any power. I mean, they couldn't fight, but nobody wanted to be told by the Pope, you're going to hell. Why? Because everyone believed that if the Pope said that you suck or whatever, and you got excommunicated, you wouldn't go to heaven. Why did everybody care so much about going to heaven? Well, one, people live very short, violent lives. And so by making people afraid of the church, you could control people. It's the same thing as today. These are people who have nothing to offer. I remember the entire performing arts community in St. Louis was on pins and needles from this group of people who I was friends with at one time, who created basically what I call the cancel committee. Because at any time they could accuse you of sexual assault or accuse you of racism, and everyone was afraid because it wasn't okay to say, you know what, shut up. 2 years later, people are now willing to say, you know what, they've accused so many people, no one cares what they say anymore.
That's correct.
And their entire value is gone. And which is why South City is, again, more tolerable to me. Because people are no longer responding to these idiots. No one cares. The people that they were friends with are now doing stuff with us because they saw that they were in this group of people and they were trying to do the right thing. And they quietly moved away from them because those people are not for real. But it's all about control. It's not about fixing racism or sexism or sexual assault or whatever, or trans rights. It's about control.
Yeah, it is about control. I want you to see things my way. So now I want to be on the soapbox. I want to have control. I want people to listen to what I have to say. And and that, first of all, that's never sustainable. It's never sustainable for a very long time. You never have anybody, especially in Western society, who stays on top for long. It always falls. And a perfect example, the best example, the absolutely best example is Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, probably more than anyone else in the West, I would say definitely more than any other leader in the West, was responsible for Nazi Germany not going any further than they did. Sure, Stalin's troops in the East, that's another story for another day, and Stalin wasn't the West. But Winston Churchill, he united the West. He got the United States in the war. He did everything he could. And then 6 months after Nazi Germany fell, they voted him out of office. So how's that for appreciation? And he was devastated. He said, look what I've done for these people, and they've turned on me all of a sudden. That's how people are. So I don't know why anybody would ever want to be the king of the castle, the top of the pedestal, because it's just a matter of time before they fall.
Yeah.
And
there's always the story of, there's always someone coming after you.
I don't understand why people just, I think the one, I talked about this before, we've mentioned this before, in that until you change the hearts and minds of people, things will never change. And you've if you're going to accuse somebody of faults, you have to look in the mirror and think, okay, so I'm perfect, right? No, everybody screws up. Everybody does things that you think, wow, I wish I had never said that. Wow, I was wrong for doing that. I can't believe I actually did this. Absolutely, everybody does that. But the difference between, in my opinion, a good person and a bad person is the good person says, look, I've screwed up in the past. I'm going to screw up in the future, but I'm really making a conscious effort to be a better person and not to do that as much as possible. The bad person says, F that, I'm going to do what I want. That's the difference. That's the difference. Because everybody has screwed up. Everybody has hurt feelings. Everybody has wronged somebody else. Everybody has said things that have been hateful. Everybody has done that. And when the comedians do it, there's a difference between saying it to be funny and saying it to be hateful. And everything comes down to intent. What did they intend to do? If they intended to get a laugh, that's one thing. If they intended to belittle people and put them aside and make them something less than human, that's another thing. Big difference. And I'm going to quote something that Ricky Gervais said, and this is what got him in a bunch of trouble. Okay, this is in quotations. I'm reading it verbatim. So those of you who are offended by bad language, close your ears. Quote, old-fashioned women, oh God, you know, the ones with wombs, those fucking dinosaurs. I love the new women. They're great. The ones you've been seeing lately, you know, the ones with beards and cocks. Now, to me, that's funny. But some people think it's hateful. If you think it's hateful, don't listen to Ricky Gervais.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, if there's a person with a beard and a penis, okay, and you expect me, and I'll give you an example of something that happened, why there's a lot of dishonesty going on. So there was a person at one of the events I was at, and there was a woman who I was dating that was friends with this guy, and well, all right, now I'm canceled. He's technically not a guy, but I remember this person when they looked like a man. There was they dressed like a man, and then they started dressing like a woman and got some enhancement to where they started getting boobs. And this person kept trying to kiss me on the lips. And I'd be like, after the third or fourth time, it was a weird, touchy thing because it's like, you're not really supposed to do that regardless of what your gender, but
true.
He had seen a friend of mine kiss me. And then I kind of was like, drew back, and he's like, well, you let her kiss you? And I was like, well, hold up. I know this person. And immediately he was like, oh, well, you don't really accept me as a woman. And I said, I don't accept or not accept you as anything, bro. And I think I said something, I accidentally said bro or dude, it was a reaction because this person was pushing themselves upon me. And yes, I physically saw them as a dude. If you're saying that I'm the same as a KKK lynching a black person because I'm seeing someone with a square jaw and facial hair, knowing they have and they're trying to kiss me and I'm not into it, there's nothing wrong. If you're a male and you're into kissing other men, I'm not putting that down. But you can't assume that.
Right.
If the next month it was like, Jay's one of those. And the only reason why, quote, I didn't get canceled was because of their racism. Because they assumed, oh, yeah, you got to know. They told this person, oh, yeah, black guys don't like trans people. Well, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
How many white guys do you know who are heterosexual who want to kiss a trans person? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with trans, but to say I don't want to do that I physically see a difference between you and a woman to a woman who was born, whatever they call cis woman, that terminology, to say that I'm somehow hateful and I'm just as bad as the KKK, that shows that you really have the KKK's values. Because if you're making that comparison, one, you don't know anything about the history, and two, you're being just utterly dishonest. Don't make me do something I don't want to do. If you want to consider yourself the same as a woman, fine. Once you involve me, then you got to worry about what I think, and that's a whole other game.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing where they lose me. Look, this is the way I think. You need to respect the way I feel. Okay, I'll buy that. So will you respect the way I feel? No, you're canceled. And
Right.
that's where it doesn't ring true. You've totally lost me when you start taking that attitude. You've totally lost me.
Yeah. And the problem is that the trans thing, I think, was so impactful because it's something that's, the relationship between black and white is one thing, racial things. You can go your life and never interact with a black or white person. It's happened. It's easier for white people, of course. There's certain places I've gone where there's not a black person for hundreds of miles.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about men and women, that's a completely different kind of relationship. And that's where everything got mixed up. Well, when you try to say the trans LGBT thing is the same as black and white, that's where you screw up. Because there's a natural metabolic process that causes men to want to be with women. It's not a social thing. And it's not to say that there aren't gay animals. I don't get into all that crap. But the reality is there is a unique function that draws a man to a woman that perpetuates the species. I'm not judging people by whether or not they have children or not. But what I'm saying is when you try to scientifically alter that and say, well, it's not reasonable for a man to look at a person who appears to be a man because they were, especially if you knew them, and to say, oh, well, that's not the same thing. If you're not saying that trans woman is the same as a woman who was born a woman, that you're somehow a Klansman bigot, that's where everything got mixed up. Because now you're defying the actual process of that nature, in terms of how we think and how we're attracted to each other.
Well, and that's, you're right. And it depends on what your goal is also.
Right.
If your goal is to have somebody more accepting as to how you see yourself, if that's truly your goal, then you need to listen to these people and then make your argument. In other words, that person, you did not want to kiss that person. Okay. Well, how come you don't? They tell you, they say, oh, okay, I understand that. Now, if they continue to try to force themselves upon you,
right,
you're going to push that person away. If they say, I'm sorry, I didn't know you felt that way. Please accept my apology. Now let's move on.
Right.
That would probably go a whole lot further than the other way. And it just the whole wanting to kiss somebody. If I'm a 62-year-old man, if all of a sudden I want to go ahead and hug and kiss every 25-year-old woman, what are people going to call me?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And rightfully so, because you just don't do that. It's just not done.
Right.
And there's no trans anything. It's just not done. You don't do that to strangers.
And all three is most trans people don't do that, but it's just an example of the mentality of what the problem is that you have a small number of people who are like that in any group. And then it's like, well, instead of dealing with that person as being overbearing, like there was a black guy on TV, he said, I wouldn't date a trans person. And then the LGBT people some people were calling him an anti-trans bigot. And they're saying, well, no, you asked me. I mean, I didn't come out here to go off on you. You brought it up.
You asked me a question. I gave you an answer, and now I'm criticized.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
And it's a setup.
Yeah.
Because the more people who are in trouble, the more power the authoritarian minded people have over everyone. Well, they feel good knowing that they can control people.
And that tactic is nothing new. I mean, once upon a time, there was the old adage, how do you trap a politician? You ask them the simple question: have you stopped beating your wife? There's no good answer to that. Right. And it's the same thing. You set people up to fail. Right.
Right. And and I think I've seen certainly in this community of South City and just in general saying, look, people are coming to grips with that. Coming to grips with the fact that over time it's like, you know what? Nothing I'm going to do is going to get me out of trouble because someone's going to try to use this and say this. And you get into more of this, who are your real friends? Mm-hmm. Your real friends know you're not abusive, even if you say this, that, or the other. You're not so much worried about this, quote, community of the left or community of the right. You're more concerned about the people who know you, who you know